What's up guys, Jake Lowry here, and today we are very excited because we're going to be testing out brand new JDM fishing lures from Megabass. And the reason we're so excited is because these lures caught my attention because of the way that they look. They look like no other fishing lure that I have ever seen before, and I'm really curious to see if these things are a gimmick or if they're actually very, very effective. We're going to go through a couple features about those lures as to why I think they might be a gimmick, but before we do that, why don't we take a look at this fishing spot, because I am super stoked about the fishing today. So the reason I think the fishing is going to be so good today is that the weather has finally started to cool off, and that means the water temperature is finally starting to go down with it. Here in Texas in the summertime, the bass do not like that hot weather and they get sluggish and they get lazy. Now, as soon as we start to get some of those colder evenings and colder temperatures, the fishing picks up tremendously. On top of that, you have a lot of people that aren't focused on fishing in the fall, and they're mostly focused on hunting and other types of outdoors activities. So that makes this very, very exciting. So this lake is a small lake. It's perfect size for a kayak, but the main thing that's nice about this lake, it has a ton of laydowns. It has a ton of grass around the entire bank, and it has a ton of shad in it. It's like the perfect transition from swamp to piney woods lake, and it can hold some massively giant fish in it, and I've hooked some very, very large fish in this lake before. So I'm very excited about potentially hooking into a big fish today on some of these kind of odd JDM lures that we have never tried before. So that said, why don't we get those JDM lures out, and why don't we see if we can't test some of those features and see if those things are even worth purchasing, because they were $10 a pop. And after that, why don't we see if we can't hook into some giants. All right guys, I have the 3 Megabass lures right in this box. I'm going to go through each of them and then show you exactly why I think they might be gimmicks. And I'm actually pretty intrigued by these lures because at the very minimum, the packaging caught my eye. So the first lure we have coming out of the bag is probably the least gimmicky out of all 3. This is the Dark Sleeper 3-inch. This is in a 1/2 ounce size. Why don't we get this thing out of the package and take a closer look? Right off the bat, this essentially just looks like a 3-inch little swim bait. One thing to note is that it is very heavy for its size, and then also the hook is embedded behind the gills right there, which is supposedly supposed to make it weedless. So curious to see that. I like the quality and the detail in the plastic, and the color actually looks very, very good. Again, we're gonna see if the action of this thing is good, and I'm not really convinced by the thickness of any of this plastic, and then also by the detail on these lures, that this thing is going to hold up at all to any type of numbers of fish, right? This thing might only last like 2 to 3 fish, which for a $10 lure is not something that I'm looking for. Next one I think is probably my most intriguing lure that, if it works, is going to be very exciting. This is the 3.2-inch 3/4 ounce sleeper gill. So this is a bluegill imitation, and it looks like the perfect size to imitate a bluegill. Why don't we get this thing out of the package? So right off the bat, this thing feels way better. The tail on this thing is absolutely massive for its length, and it just looks super realistic with the color and then the glitter. Very interesting thing about these baits, again, is that hook being hidden by the fins should make it weedless, and I hope it doesn't prevent me from getting good hook sets with these lures, because if that plastic kind of gets on that hook point, I might not be hooking fish. The only thing that really concerns me right now is for 10 bucks is the durability. There's not that much plastic in this lure, and I don't really think that it has a whole lot going for it from a durability perspective, especially with the weight to size ratio. All right, last lure I have is the Sleeper Crawl. This to me seems like the most gimmicky lure out of all of them, because it is essentially the shape of a crawfish. I don't think I've ever successfully used a crawfish imitating bait that was in this shape. So why don't we get this out of the package? Right off the bat there, that hook is very, very hidden, and it's very small. So I'm not really convinced that this thing is gonna get good hook sets at all. And then the other thing about it is it doesn't even really look like a realistic crawfish, because that tail is kind of hidden away, which is the most action that you get out of a crawfish. And these claws just kind of dangle around. So not very impressed with this lure, and I think this is my least likely lure to catch any fish on today. So we're gonna see if this thing works. And again, my personal opinion is that a crawfish imitating style of lure like this that looks like a crawfish generally doesn't work very well. So overall, for $30, you get 3 soft plastic lures, which to me feels very gimmicky with the just kind of weird features that comes with. It seems more like a cheap style of lure and less like a, you know, $10 premium lure. So that said, why don't we get some of these things rigged up on our rods and see if we can't hook into some fish, and then we're gonna launch the kayak and hopefully catch some big fish today. All right, guys, let's get this kayak launched and let's see if we can't hook into some fish early, man. That would be absolutely exhilarating. All right, we were having some slight technical difficulties with the Garmin this morning. For some reason, it wouldn't turn on, but now we are back in action, guys. I have both of those swim baits tied on. We're gonna save the crawfish for later because I think a bottom bait will give me better chances later in the day than a swim bait. I feel like I need to capitalize on the cooler temperatures in the morning to hook into a swim bait fish. I'm gonna head across to what I think is the most productive bank on the entire lake, and then we're gonna start bombing these little swim baits around, and we're actually also gonna test out the action of these things because, you know, that's gonna be a big question of whether or not these things are gimmicky, because they look very gimmicky. All right, I wanna be close, but not too close. This looks like a pretty good spot to start. Let me back off of here. I'm gonna pick up the bait caster, which I have on that 3/4 inch bluegill style of swim bait right there. Let's give this thing a little cast here. Okay, wow. The tail moves dramatically, guys. That is a thumper of a swim bait. Okay, guys, this thing looks actually really good in the water. Very realistic. The most similar swim bait I can compare this to is that Googan Squad guppy that I used, but the guppy had a smaller tail and less action. This thing really thumps. So we should probably get bit, hopefully in no time here. And it casts super well, which is a good sign. There's some fish hitting the surface here. There's a lot of gar in this area, so sometimes you think you have chances to hook into some feeding bass, but reality it's just a bunch of gar, but we'll see. This to me looks like more of a bass feeding frenzy over here, but I could be wrong. That looked like a gar. All right, so I picked up some grass on that cast. Oh my gosh, guys, that is a brand new spool of 12-pound fluorocarbon. There's $20 right there, man. And a $10 lure, so count that 30 bucks in one cast. What the? I tied a good knot. I don't understand what happened. Maybe I didn't. I'm not even gonna attempt to get that out. That's gonna have to get cut out. And then hopefully I have enough line to get me through the rest of the day, man. That is the most bullshit thing that I think I've ever even seen, man. Oh. Just cut all that shit. That seems like a very quick recovery. Look at that. Okay, so you're not gonna see me catch a fish on the sleeper gill because I only bought one. So, sorry guys, not sorry, but I will pick up the spinning rod, which apparently is the only rod I should be casting, and see if I can hook something on that. All right, well, there's the crawfish rigged up. I'm not gonna use this right away because I see a lot of bait fish activity, it looks like. We're gonna pick up this white little swim bait right here and see if we can't hook into a fish off of that. And this is tied up on the spinning rod because of its weight. It's the lightest lure that I bought for this test. But this one gives me the most promise about action, but also the most concern about durability, right? Because it's very thin amount of plastic. So the action actually doesn't look as aggressive as that bluegill one, which could potentially be a good thing. White is one of my favorite colors, so we're gonna give that a plus. And yeah, we're just gonna have to cast this thing around and see if we can't hook into a fish, because we're down to 2 lures. I was hoping, you know, I could keep those things on throughout the whole day, but that obviously did not work out. Okay, it's like over here where all this activity was. Again, I'm just completely basing this off of prior experience. I'm not convinced that these aren't gar or, I don't know, a little shad or something. Whoa, I just got bit. Could have been a crappie. %100 a bite. Kind of ate it right off the edge of this point here. So I'm seeing them blow up. It's a lot of activity over here. There he is. That's a nice fish too. Nice, guys. What kind of fish is this? Oh, it's a bass. Nice, guys. On the JDM. Whew. On the JDM, that is actually a big fish, man. I'm not saying it's huge, but I'd say that's probably a pound, pound and a half. Bigger, much bigger than I really thought I was gonna hook on this little white swim bait. Let's get this thing off. Man, first fish of the day. Very, very impressed, to be honest, guys. And it looks like this thing held up pretty solidly. Oh, wow. That is exactly why there's so many fish over here. I just went over a giant bait ball right on this point. Let's get this guy a weight on him. Maybe we could track best 5 today. That's ambitious. Get this guy. All right, what are we at? 159. Locking it in. All right, let's get this guy released now. Nice little bass, man. Almost a 2-pounder on the right away on the JDM lure, and he is off, man. That makes total sense, guys. So there were actually a ton of fish over here, and they were bass. And the reason for all the fish activity was because there was a just massive ball of bait sitting right at that point, which I'm hoping I didn't spook away. But that's an interesting sign for today so far, is that, you know, these bass wanna be on bait balls. He also kind of ate it on like a pause too, which was different because I was kind of slowly retrieving it that whole time. All right, let's pick up the crawfish. This is the hilarious JDM crawfish right there. The plastic on this thing is already messed up. The hook is small. I do not think this thing is really going to get me any luck, although it does look pretty realistic. I just don't think I have any odds for this thing to work ever. I think my drag was too tight initially. This is a really good bank for me to kind of pitch around and see if I can get under some of this cover and some of this brush. You know, get it like right on that bank in the shade, man. I feel like that gives me some actually pretty solid odds to be hooking into something. Just very close to it. I've had good success in this lake on creature baits before, and I mean, at the very minimum, this is essentially just a goofy looking creature bait. It's heavy enough to not get snagged. Oh no. Oh no. That is worst case scenario. Oh no, don't tell me I did it to the second swim bait I was gonna use today. Come on. Come on. Okay, give me. No! I'm not getting that thing. It's like 30 feet in the air. Man. Oh, 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 oh. Oh. Well, guys, that is very unfortunate because I only have one lure left out of the JDM lures. And I'm usually, like, I usually don't lose lures like this, man. I promise you. This is an abnormal thing for me. So it looks like we are throwing a crawfish style lure that, the one that I said I did not want to fish today too. Oh boy. Maybe I'll lose this one on purpose and we can abandon the challenge. Throw swim baits around or something. That's crazy. That's actually never happened to me that quickly, to lose two lures like immediately like that. I gotta hit these laydowns over here before that other boat goes through here, because I think a lot of it is the first damn person to throw into the spot is the one that catches the most fish. That was a fish. That's what I'm saying about these baits, man. These hooks being like embedded in the plastic, man. If that fish doesn't get that hook just right, you're pretty much SOL, which is kind of what I'm dealing with right now. That was a nice fish too. You really gotta set the hook on him. He's not gonna come back either. What's going on over there? Oh, shit. I didn't even realize that. Sorry, I didn't see your line. I didn't hit it. That guy was fishing from the bank for catfish, and that commotion on the bank was one of his stringered catfish, and oops to me, I almost went right into his line. That would have been not great fishing etiquette. I was like, what the heck is that? I was getting ready to throw at his stringered fish. There's a lot of bait right there. That was unfortunate. Do one of these. Oh my gosh, man. These Megabass lures, man. I might not be able to get this one. It's not that deep. That's my main issue with these things, is like, it's a crawl that's not weedless, so you can't throw around any cover, which is like, to me, the only reason I'd be throwing a crawl. I didn't even like, it was snagged before I even started reeling, man. That's crazy. Yeah, super weedless, guys. I don't know what kind of fishing they do in Japan, but evidently there's not a lot of trees in Japan, because this is ridiculous. All right, we're back in the shade, guys. I don't know what's going on today. I just think this lure, man, getting a snag on every single piece of wood is just not, it's just not something that makes any sense in my brain for a crawfish style of lure. Like, especially a lure like this, where like essentially the whole point is to throw it near structure, right? Like, this isn't a rocky lake. Maybe it works around rocks pretty well. I guess Japan is pretty mountainous, but you can't throw this near structure. What can you throw it near? All right, guys, that is going to wrap up the video. Unfortunately, the fishing just wasn't that good today. I think the reason for that was because those baits were okay, but I lost the 2 baits pretty much right away that were probably gonna catch me fish today. I think those swim baits were pretty solid. I just feel like that weird little feature where the hook is in the fin doesn't necessarily bode well for fishing. And the reason for that is it doesn't really make it very weedless. It just reduces the number of fish you're gonna hook because it's hiding that hook behind some plastic. Now, that said, that crawfish bait, like I said in the beginning, man, I just have never had any luck on a bait that looks like a crawfish that detailedly. I just feel like a creature bait or a crawfish style soft plastic is much better than something like that. That, I think, is much more gimmicky than the other style of baits that I use, like the swim baits. But overall, $30 worth of lures, that was completely not worth the price point. You're better off buying a couple packs of soft plastics and having a bunch of hooks, and you could have 20 lures for the same price that have pretty much the same exact action. So definitely not worth it there. So I would have called those lures today a definitive gimmick, and I'm probably never going to be buying a lure like that ever again. Now, that said, even though we didn't catch any fish, if you guys like this video, make sure you like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and I will catch you guys next time.